Those Were the Days is filmed before a live internet audience.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Those Were the Days, the show where we chat about retro TV and ask ourselves, does this thing hold up? Well, I couldn't answer that by myself, so I'm joined by a talented cast of characters tonight. He has his thumbs and his imagination. TV's Travis.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a half-hour sitcom, and the entirety of the jokes are going to be based around macadamia nuts. All right? Because is there a funnier nut than a macadamia nut? No, I don't think so.
No.
It's not a pecan. It's not a cashew. Cashews are droops anyway. And it's not even a Brazil nut. No. Macadamia nuts. That's the key. All right?
All right. And visiting us from deep space planet of Twilo, Amy Frost.
I have a lot of feelings about this week's episode, but I'll just get it out right up front. 2 thumbs up.
And of course, how on earth is he able to see out of the back of his head? Audie Norman.
Okay, boys, time to come up with some weird alien for the show this week. But remember, we're on a TV budget. So what you got? Okay, breathes water. Well, how can we do that? Like underwater? Oh, just drinking water is the same as breathing? Yeah, we can make that work. What else? 4 eyes? Did you hear me say budget? Oh, in the back of the head, but still. Oh, we never actually see them. They're just under the hair? Okay, yeah, we can sell that. Anything else? No thumbs. That's different. Yeah, that's easy enough. Just gotta have the actors act it out and keep the camera in the right spot. Okay, no thumbs. I think that's about what? Walnuts? The aliens love walnuts? Why walnuts? Just because? It's just funny? Well, oh, okay. Well, I'll take these to Mr. Van Dyke, see what he thinks. Good job, fellas.
That's probably exactly how it went, I would imagine, there in the writer's room. I know it was pretty obvious what show we're talking about, but if you didn't catch on, it's not obvious at all. It was the Dick Van Dyke Show. And you say, Steven, the Dick Van Dyke Show is not a sci-fi television show. And I say, well, I got permission from my friends ahead of time to stretch this topic and just throw in a sci-fi-ish episode of one of my favorite television shows, and that was It May Look Like a Walnut, the Dick Van Dyke Show, Season 2, Episode 20, which was groundbreaking laugh-out-loud television for the time, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it, but I want to know, first of all, what do you have any memory of the show? Did you ever watch the show? This episode in particular, does it stand out? We'll start with Travis.
So the Dick Van Dyke Show, it and the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the shows of this era I know of. I remember, I just don't ever remember watching them. It's weird, but yet I know about them, and and it feels familiar as soon as it starts. But like familiar in like a strange way, like riding in your car when someone else is driving. It's familiar, but it's not.
Yeah. Gotcha. Perfect. Oh, that's awesome. Amy, how about you?
So I have a big giant soft spot in my heart for Dick Van Dyke, like as an actor and person. Like Mary Poppins was my favorite when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And he has a very excellent cameo episode on The Golden Girls. So I love Dick Van Dyke. I don't know that I have ever actually seen the Dick Van Dyke Show prior to this episode. Heck of a start. I mean, I get the gist of the whole thing, but heck of a one to go in on. Like the bar has been set really high.
It's so fun.
Real
to
quick,
that. Yeah.
I have to say that it took everything within me to not do the Dick Van Dyke English accent for my intro. It was not easy to hold that back, but I.
What do you mean, governor?
You're welcome. You're welcome, is what I'm saying.
Step in time, baby.
Oh, and how about you, Audie?
I've kind of fallen into the same boat as Travis. Is like I know of this show. I think I've seen it here and there. Never really watched it, but it's hard not to know about it. And then I watch it and I forget that his name's not actually Dick Van Dyke on the show, and I'm like, what? Why? What? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of wild that it's called the Dick Van Dyke Show, yet the head writer of the show is Carl Reiner, and he's not known as Dick Van Dyke on the show. He's Rob Petrie. But I think coming
hmm
off of some of that Mary Poppins heat, and he had some stuff going on in Broadway, that it just the Dick Van Dyke Show's the name. They could have easily called it the Petries, and everybody like, okay, cool, I'm watching the Petries. Because it's their name, Rob and Laura Petrie. Which X-Files crossover, Scully and Mulder, when posing as a married couple, referred to themselves as Rob and Laura Petrie as their code names. Read that factoid today. Thought that was cool.
Nice.
Outstanding.
It wasn't unknown, or it wasn't like out of the realm of normal for a show to be the Dick Van Dyke Show and then the character to be somebody else. And the
Yeah.
Andy Griffith Show, he's Andy
Oh, yeah.
Taylor.
Right,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I
You're
think
going
I
on
think
that
even
star.
the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I don't
She was
think-
Mary Richards.
Yeah,
on the Mary
exactly.
Tyler
So
Moore Show.
like
Yeah.
that was kind of a thing back then, was you would put your main star's name on the show to draw people in, because
Because it didn't matter what they were doing.
No. You knew,
You
well,
were
you know what
watching
you were
it.
getting. You were branded at that point in
Yeah.
classic TV. Is like you knew what
Yeah.
you watched when you were watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. You're getting him. You watch Mary Tyler Moore. You knew her from this jam, and now she's got her own show, and you're just like, oh, that's Mary Tyler Moore's new thing. But then spin-offs of that, you got different stuff like Rhoda. You know, Rhoda was I can't remember the actress, but that was a character name, and Phyllis. That was a spin-off of Mary Tyler Moore Show. That was the character name. But I think Phyllis Diller was also Phyllis. Same name, same whatever. It's all fine. We'll
You
talk
know,
about those another time. We'll get there some other day.
Yeah.
But this show, you guys, I've been talking about the show for quite a while. But this cemented my love of classic TV. This is one of the first shows that I remember watching by myself in my bedroom. It aired at 8 o'clock. Before I had to go to bed. It was like the last gasp of television before I went to sleep. Had TV in my room. Nickelodeon would end after the 7:30 half hour. 8 o'clock, the Dick Van Dyke Show came on. And I remember loving this show, even though some of the concepts and some of the episodes should have gone over my head. I just remember it being hilarious. And I think a lot of that is the physical comedy that Dick Van Dyke was well known for. He was a master of physical comedy. And anybody's going to laugh at that. I don't care if you're 3 or 93. That stuff's pretty great. And it just worked for me as that kid. And I got upset when Nickelodeon moved from 7:30, ending at 8, to ending at 8:30. And I was like, wait, 8:30 is my bedtime. The Dick Van Dyke Show is going to start coming on at 8:30. I remember being actually upset that cartoons would be extending past my bedtime. And naturally, my bedtime extended to 9, and I watched it anyway because, you know, I am master
okay.
of I'm the captain of my soul, as they say.
that is I just have to say that is the most Steven thing I've ever heard
Yep.
Yeah.
in my life.
Yeah.
That you, as a kid, were upset at an extra half hour of cartoons because it meant you would miss the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, that's.
It's fantastic. Never change.
I told Stephanie the other day, I said, I'm pretty sure just the older I get, it's just my body is catching up to my soul. It's just moving up. I'm starting to feel like myself. I'm like, oh, I'm just getting closer to where I should be. You know, gray bearded and everything. Let's go.
Yep.
But this show is obviously one of the classic television shows of all time. People talk about it. They cite it as groundbreaking and for all kinds of different reasons, which we'll get into. Fun thing about this episode, I wanted to say, oh, it's some random episode about sci-fi. TV Guide's number 15 top 100 television episodes of all time. Right up there with Vitamina Vegemin and the conveyor belt stuff from I Love Lucy. This era, just for whatever reason, produced a certain caliber of television that stands the test of time. I don't know if it's because it had to be so clean, so they went so hard on just the goofy jokes, a la the Muppets. You know, the Muppets had to do things that just they don't age. The jokes are always going to be funny, and they're always going to be okay for families. That's the way they roll, and it makes you try a lot harder. You know, fart jokes are easy, but here we are with walnuts going, oh, that's pretty good too. So anyway, this happened. This episode aired in 1963. The show itself only ran for 5 seasons, 1961 to 1965. It's also the last show that fully aired its entire run in black and white. They were going to move to color in the 6th season, but the writers, producers all decided we've done enough. We have made our mark. Let's move on. So they ended the show after season 5, which was, a good move, and it was doing well at the time too. It's not like it was bombing out. But there's a whole bunch of really cool facts about the show that we can get into. And some of them I just want to go ahead and share with you now. Carl Reiner is the writer of the show, the showrunner of the time. And you guys familiar with Carl Reiner? Yeah? Would be, even if you aren't.
yeah.
Because he is Ocean's 11. He played a wonderful character in help me out. What was his character's name? Saul. He played Saul. He was fantastic in Saul. And you also might know his son, Rob Reiner, from early on.
A few things.
He's done a handful of things,
Yeah,
just a few.
he's been
This
around.
is Spinal Tap, Princess Bride. Holy cow! He's acted in tons of stuff. He got his start in All in the Family back in the day. There's probably a bunch of other stuff Rob Reiner from. But we lost Carl Reiner just like 2 years ago at the right old age of 900. I don't remember what he is. But he got his start writing for a variety show with another one of a kind, Mel Brooks, on Your Show of Shows with Sid Caesar. So a lot of what the Dick Van Dyke Show is about, it's about Rob Petrie, who is a writer on a variety show called The Alan Brady Show. A lot of those stories come from Carl Reiner's own experience writing for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows, which is super neat to me. So he had a whole view of what a writing team actually felt like, and he got the right cast and everything. Dick Van Dyke is joined by, of course, Mary Tyler Moore, who plays his wife, Maury Amsterdam, who plays Buddy Sorrell, which if you watch more of this show, Buddy will slowly become your favorite character on this entire show. And I've got some cool facts about him. And Rosemarie, who I don't think has a surname. I think she's just Rosemarie. And that she plays Sally Rogers on the show, and they're the writing team. And Mel Cooley is like their executive that comes in, and Buddy and Mel butt heads quite a bit, and it's amazing. But anyway, the show ran for those 5 years, won 15 primetime Emmys. And yeah, it was a big deal. Mary Tyler Moore broke ground on this show because she wore capris. Oh, slow down. Standards and practices. Well, they were not cool with it. And I found out why. I thought this was very interesting. So at the time, all the TV housewives, Leave It to Beaver and stuff, wore dresses and vacuumed. Mary Tyler Moore hated that. She thought it was stupid, wasn't realistic, didn't make a whole lot of sense. So Carl Reiner was like, whatever you want to do, I don't care. So she would sneak pants into like a few scenes in the early season, like a few or early episodes of the show, and stayed in practice like, hold on a second. There's a problem. There's cupping. She has some cupping going on in her pants, meaning her rear end was well viewed. Is what I'm picking up on. They were like, we're not sure. This is basically pornography on television.
You can't have a body.
You can't have a body.
I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and what I loved was her quote from the time. She said, I've seen all the other actresses, and they're always running the vacuum in these little flowered frocks with high heels on, and I don't do that. She said, and I don't know any of my friends who do that, so why don't we try to make this real, and I'll dress on the show the way I do in real life. Within a few weeks, we were sneaking pants into a few other scenes in every episode, and they were definitely cupping under, and everyone thought it was great. She just basically broke the rules until they stopped hassling her about it. And I'm like, you are awesome.
A delight.
You're such a rebel and so cool. And this was a little bit different because they learned how to work her character so she could butt heads with Rob, but they were always a team. So it never went too far beyond that 1960s. They didn't get in hot water over anything at the time because they still wanted to be celebrated. But they made it so that they were a comedy team and less of a daddy knows best kind of stuff, because Rob was screwing up a lot and she was calling him out on it, and vice versa. And it was a lot of fun and kind of set the stage for those kinds of things as we went forward. Every time, they just made these things work for him. That was cool. We're going to get to the episode in a second, but I got this really fantastic thing about Buddy Maury Amsterdam, who played Buddy. He was a vaudeville actor in the 1920s. That was real cool. He did jokes with his brother. He played the straight man, who would play a straight man against his brother's comedy, and he also played the cello really well. Somehow this cello deal got him a gig working in a speakeasy owned by Al Capone. Yes, that Al Capone. And the reason he ended up in California was because he was in the middle of a gunfight that occurred at the speakeasy. It decided this was not his jam, so he went out to California and he became the human joke machine. He didn't act as the human joke machine, in which he gave so many jokes so often, so fast. He was like a Robin Williams of his time. People thought he was just the fastest dude they'd ever met. There was one person said they ran into Maury Amsterdam on the street and said, "Hey, how you been?" And he said, "Not been so great. I've been in bed and I've had a cold for 2 weeks." And he says, "What's so funny about that?" Because they're just so used to him cracking wise. They were just like, "I don't get it." That was his whole jam. So he lived his days just rapid fire jokes. But that's basically everything I know relevant to get you excited about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, or the Dick Van Dyke Show. We'll get to Mary Tyler Moore. That was another of my favorites. So, and there's probably some little things sprinkled out as we go down this. But you'd say sci-fi, Steven. Again, why is this sci-fi? Well, because this episode is all about the aliens from the planet Twilo. And what do we know? Do we know anything about the state of sci-fi in television and movies in 1963? Like, was there outside Twilight Zone?
This would have been pre Lost in Space, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that came along for a couple more years. It's pre Star Trek. So sci-fi was science fiction at the time was very much like B movies. And I mean, watching this episode, you could tell like the thing he was watching on TV, it was late night TV, was science fiction and monster movies, and it all sounded exactly like what he was watching. Theremin music, and people screaming no, no, no over and over. Like that was sci-fi at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of what I have read and understand it to be. So I think that was pretty accurate what they had on the show. And by the way, the voice on the TV was Carl Reiner.
Oh, was it really? That's awesome. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That's super cool. Yeah. So we know that there wasn't a lot to draw from in terms of sci-fi TV at this point, other than Plan 9 from outer space and, Mysterious Bullmen from Mars and those kinds of jams. So that's where we're going to end up with the Kolak and the planet Twilo and the people who drink/breathe water, air. I don't know. But we're going to pick this show up right from the beginning to something I've always loved about this show, and that is the intro. The music lives in my head rent free. I was humming it all day. After watching that episode, I'm like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just in my head all the time. And it has one of our first gags that we get is the ottoman. Does Rob Petrie trip over the ottoman, or does he sidestep it? And I remember as a kid watching this show just being, is he going to trip this time? And he would always say, he sidestepped it. Oh, yeah, he sidestepped it. And I picked one of I don't know what the ratio is. I should have looked it up. But this episode is one of the episodes where he trips over the ottoman at the beginning. And you're in for a good time when he trips over the ottoman. We're about to have it made. And we go to what I can only imagine is happening in bedrooms all around the world at midnight. 2 people in bed watching TV, separate beds, no less. Yeah. Watching something on the television.
Well, somebody's watching. Somebody's trying not to watch.
As the horror-averse, I felt for Laura in this episode so hard. It's like, please don't watch that. Can you watch that literally anywhere else? It's fine. Don't worry. Just and the when she's looking, I can still hear it, and he goes in with the pillow, and then he's like, "Okay, it's all over now." And she's like, "No, I'm still breathing." And I was like, "I love you so much." It's jumping ahead a little, but for a while, when you think that she is deeply gaslighting him into madness, and I was like, "That's correct. Good work. I'm very proud of you." So good.
You're doing what should be done.
Good for you.
So yeah, I did have in my notes. Rob tries to kill Laura because he's
Yeah.
he's covering her face with the pillow because
Here.
it's just and he's so
You're fine.
enthralled with what he's watching. He's holding her back there, uh, and the one line that got me after this, they were talking about Colac, and she's like, "I can't breathe." He's like, "If you were Colac, you wouldn't need oxygen." So good. And I was trying to figure out like what sells this because the setup of this episode is really smart. It's basically a retelling of the movie with all the info we're gonna need to follow along as we go on this, potential gaslighting / nightmare adventure. Because some of it is in Dick Van Dyke's really good portrayal of what happened. His retelling of what happened. He's so excited about what's going on and the way he phrases things and how he gives it. You're like, man, this movie. I would watch this.
So, show of hands, who identified with Dick Van Dyke in that scene where you are talking about the thing you are incredibly passionate about? Someone who has no idea what you're talking about whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yes. All
It
four
couldn't
of
be
us.
less interested. But you're
Yeah.
just like, I am getting
Please
this
do
out.
not actively. Please do not.
There are plenty of people that have watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe with their significant other. I am not one of those people. My wife doesn't want to go near them, which is fine. But when I try to talk about it, she's just like, okay, what? Okay, sure.
Yeah, we've all had that
Understand.
conversation, and the person you're talking to just glazes over.
Yeah.
And they're present, but they're not really there anymore. And they're just like, eventually they're going to wear out and not be able to talk anymore.
Yeah.
I worked at a game store. And now D&D is very exciting and fun to play, right? Like D&D is great. Hearing about someone else's D&D campaign that you are not a part of, short of like the Cliff Notes highlights version, right? Like the replay at the end of your highlights, like that's fine. But just the deep dive, no one cares. I'm sorry, everybody. Nobody else cares. And a lot of people, I did a lot of, huh?
All the verbals and nonverbals. Like, please stop. I couldn't be less interested.
I do not make enough for this.
Yeah. I have smiled at someone telling me about a Star Trek movie for so long that my face hurt. I'm just like, I just don't care. Like, and I'm way over there somewhere. I'm done. But I'm just like, so I can't be excited anymore. My face is dying. Phil Rude says it's describing what it's like to be a podcaster. And yeah, podcasting is the cure for not having someone to talk to. Yeah.
Because you can just talk about it and no one can listen and you don't care. Like,
no.
You don't need to know that.
Yeah, you don't need.
I mean,
you don't
we
really
want you to
need the
listen.
people.
We do. You need to be interested in what we're interested in right now. You all need to get on board.
But it's like
I will gaslight you.
You don't need the active listener. You just need to get it out of your system. You just need to express it.
Yeah.
I'm telling my wife all about my Baldur's Gate adventures, and she's just, God bless her, she's doing everything she can to just love it. And I'm just like, do you know what I did? It's just ridiculous. But anyway, so he retells this thing. He mentions Danny Thomas, and this is the thing that classic TV suffers from. I don't know who Danny Thomas is. Nobody knows who Danny Thomas is. This is 2023. We're so far removed from whoever Danny Thomas was. I don't know. I have no clue.
Well, and it's because we're so far removed. We don't know if that's a character or an actual person.
Yeah, I'm like, is that a celebrity? Like Harpo Marx, I would have known that. Not Danny Thomas. But I'm here to tell you who Danny Thomas is. Okay, Danny Thomas is a producer on the show, a producer of the Dick Van Dyke Show, and a actor comedian in his own right. And we're going to cross over again because he was on the Ford show with Tennessee Ernie Ford from earlier. And if you've been following along with this show for a year and a half now, we covered Ernie Ford on an episode of I Love Lucy. So that's where he comes from. And he's the reason Mary Tyler Moore got cast as Laura Petrie, which I thought was pretty cool. Nice. He told Carl Reiner, like, hey, Mary Tyler Moore is really great. Carl Reiner said, I just remembered an actress with 3 names who we passed on. And so he had to go dig back through all the photos to figure out who he was talking about. And
I can hear that in his voice too.
Mhm.
I can hear Carl Reiner saying that, and it's brilliant.
yeah, it's so good. Even the stuff that wasn't meant to be funny was funny when he says it.
It's just good.
Yeah, it's just really good. But yeah, she had lied about her age to get on the show as well, which was a fun fact. And they used that in a later episode when it was revealed that she was 17 when she married Rob and their marriage wasn't legal. So they had to make it right because she had lied about her age
Nice.
so that they could get married. I'm like, you guys are good. Which leads me to a small other fact is that Carl Reiner would ask people, cast and crew of the show, for stories from their home life and things they got into. And many of the stories on the Dick Van Dyke Show were based on real events, just heightened, and overblown.
Oh, that's so good.
Which I thought was
That's
was
awesome.
pretty great. So we learned a little bit about Twiloites from Rob Petrie. Twiloites have 2 eyes in the front and 2 in the back. They remove imaginations and thumbs, and they only eat walnuts. And it's
I liked the rationale behind that. Without our thumbs and our imaginations, we can't make the things that let us go up into the stars and muck about with the Twilights.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
and I was like, well, it's logical.
That's solid.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty great. Pretty great. So they eventually finally get to sleep after Rob wakes up like 3 times to tell Laura about stuff. She sets an alarm so that she'll wake up in an hour because she knows her dreams are going to be infected with these Twiloites and she can't handle it. She's like, I should be able to wake up just when they're implanting new eyes in the back of my head or whatever.
I'll be saved by the bell.
I'll be
Now,
saved by
I
the bell.
did notice, right? So he's getting ready for dinner. He's getting ready for bed, and I did notice him throw away like a lot of wrappers
Mhm.
and things from the nightstand. And I said, okay, we might be headed into Cosby Show. You shouldn't eat that sub right before dinner territory.
Oh, yeah.
But for a while, I did just think that she was gaslighting him, and I was really proud.
Man, that was pro gaslighting if she was on it. Like,
I mean, it was a lot.
it was a lot. It's you might have married a psycho at that point. Like once all the walnuts pour out of the closet, you're like,
Yeah, that was
what have I done?
Well, that's
So
the funny thing. Up until that point, like, it could have been something she had arranged
it
somehow.
really could
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Mhm.
It was real sketchy. And Rob was in it for a little while till he gets a little agitated. But we'll get to that. When he wakes up in the morning, of course, she tells him he's not getting his waffles in the morning, because he's harassing her. And that's the way it works, Yeah, I'm not making you waffles in the morning. Forget it. Meanwhile, I'm like, well, I microwaved my own sausage and egg sandwich this morning. What happened to the 60s? It's absolutely fine.
we wear
And then
capris
Stephanie
now.
smacked you upside the head.
It's all Mary
That's
Tyler
right,
Moore and her
reality.
capris. What has she done?
Look at her sensible shoes.
Sensible shoes.
How dare she?
So we wake up in the morning, Rob walks out of the room, and there's walnuts all over the floor. Ha ha ha. Laura, nice job. You got me. Okay. And she's all, I don't know what you're talking about. And she takes a big old glass of water. Like, what are we doing? And this whole deal with Richie running in and running off with his bag of walnuts to school just absolutely killed me. Because Richie's in a lot of episodes, and he is the loudest kid you will ever hear on TV. And I don't know, like, a part of me goes, this is just obnoxious. Another part of me goes, I am a father of an 8-year-old. This is accurate. This is how they are. Thanks, Mommy. I'm taking these walnuts to school. They're my favorite. It's like, yeah, checks out. That's
Yep,
pretty great.
yep.
Basically, because the take before that, they were like, okay, we can't hear you. You need to speak up a little bit when you say your lines.
It's
And that's what came out.
yells.
They're like,
I just stuck
Okay.
forever for 5
So,
years.
was he paid by volume? Like the
Yeah,
louder he
maybe.
was, the more he made?
Yeah, we're going to give you a nickel per decibel because you're a child. It'll be fine. And then the one of the first sight gags that got me was he opens the egg carton and there's
that
walnuts
was great.
in each little
Kind
part.
of
She
small
starts
today.
cracking them. And she tucks from walnut in Rob's coat, and he's like, this is funny. You're really not gonna make me breakfast? Fine, I'm leaving, and he kind of storms out. And then we get to the office, which is our second favorite set, maybe our favorite set from the whole show. Anytime he's in the writer's room with the immensely talented Buddy and Sally, it's the best part of the show. It's my favorite part of the show. He wanders
I
in.
can't remember what Buddy said because he goes, he walks in and he's like, "Sorry, I'm late."
Oh yeah,
And I know she goes, "Sorry, I'm single," but I can't remember. I can't remember what he
Oh,
said. It was so good though,
I didn't
and I was
write it
like,
down, but it was such a good little
Yeah.
joke. I don't know.
"Sorry, I'm
You'll
single."
have to look. You guys who
That was
watched the
real
episode will
good.
have to remember, but it was sorry I'm single. It's really great. But that speaking of Rosemary, she holds her own on this show in every episode. She is easily as funny as anyone else, and deserves every bit of accolade she ever got from doing this whole thing. But yeah, Buddy cracks me up. So they're sitting there talking. He's like, did Laura tell you guys, like, why are you, because no, Buddy eats walnuts. Or they're talking about, no, they started with the conversation because he was talking about Kolak or the movie he watched. And she goes, and
Yeah.
Sally says, oh yeah, the guy who attacked the UN
Jake
or
Kennedy.
whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And
I
she
was
thought
there.
I was there. He's like, did you watch that picture? No, I was at the UN when it happened. And it's so straight laced.
If he hadn't had 4 eyes, I'd have married him.
It was so good. And it was such a Sally thing to say. And he's telling him about what, the deal, like, and then Buddy cracks some walnuts. And Buddy gives him a hard time. He's like, did you crack a walnut? Yeah, I like walnuts. What's the deal? The whole
I switched
jam.
from pistachios.
Switched from pistachios. It's so good. So that happens, and then Rob starts to get concerned, like, what are you, okay, she put you up to all this walnut stuff. And he begins, like, let's get to work. And he finds a walnut in the typewriter. He's just getting exhausted at this point. Finds walnuts in his desk. He's like, well, okay, let's work on the show. We're going to let's start. What do you guys think about starting with a boy-girl number? And Buddy lets out this line. I don't think the world is ready for a boy-girl number sang by Alan Brady and Danny Thomas. I thought that was pretty good.
It might be now.
It might be
I
ready
mean-
now. It's,
Yeah.
it's only taken 40 some years, but I think we could do it. 50
We get
years.
there.
50 years,
60.
60 years.
60.
I'm so good at math. Y'all are
Yeah.
you're so impressed. And he finds out, like, what? Wait, our guest is Danny Thomas? I feel like I would have known if our guest was Danny Thomas. Did Laura switch the guest? Like, he's like, what is going on? Be serious, And then they're standing around, he's getting more agitated, and he's like, where did the joke come from? Where his buddy goes, it'd be funny, a nearsighted turtle falling in love with an army helmet. And this is
And I was like, I would watch that so much.
and this is where they kind of break it. They're both going, ha, 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 laughing maniacally at each other because they don't know how to behave as humans because they're from the planet
Yep.
Twilo now.
Mhm.
They have no creativity. They're doing, and this is where things get serious. And you can tell because the music changes, and it starts to get more, brr, 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 it's like, whoa. Mel walks in, and Mel Cooley is their producer of some kind that is always hassling the writer's room, or Buddy and Mel never get along. And he walks in, and Rob thinks he's been saved. He's like, oh, well, Mel's not in on this. But Mel appears to be in on this because he said, did my wife call and tell you to cast Danny Thomas on the show? And Mel says, no, she was against it. She wanted Kolak. And so then Mel's like, Rob, you're worrying me. Take 2 of these and a glass of air, and he hands him two walnuts.
2 walnuts.
And then he finds walnuts in his pocket. Now he's convinced he's dreaming, and he calls home. And Laura picks up, and he says, honey, I need you to go to the bedroom, pull down the covers on my bed, and see if I'm there.
From there.
That was just great. And she's, of course, not going to do that. She's acting like, I don't know what you're talking about, Rob. It's what's going on. And then Rob's still convinced he's dreaming. He slaps himself. He doesn't wake up. It actually hurts. It's not supposed to hurt in a dream. And then the door opens. And who walks in but Danny Thomas himself?
Mhm.
With the British accent where he rolls his R's. Robert Redtree. I can't roll my R's. But it just tickled me so much. And Rob's hand gestures with the whistling, talking about, wait, the UFO sounds. I'm like, this is amazing. And it's because Danny Thomas, aka Kolak, because he says, you know who I am. I'm Kolak. Rob's getting panicky. And Kolek says he just needs to see the last remaining person on Earth. And then they do the whole shindig with the eyes in the back of the head.
I've got 20/20/20/20 vision. God, that got me.
That really did.
It
I
was
could
really
see it coming from a mile away, and it did not matter.
It didn't matter. It was so
Did
perfect.
not matter.
So Rob thinks he's still dreaming. He believes he's entered the Twilight Zone, which made me laugh out loud. I like that pretty good. And that's where I figured out, I guess the Twilight Zone was airing in 1963.
Yeah.
This makes sense. And then Rob loses his thumbs, which is really just fantastic camera work. This whole thing where you got your nephew and you're like, I don't know what happened to my thumbs. And nephew's like, what? And he's doing this whole jam and he's like waving his hands
loved
around.
that. Oh, like the hands on the face without the thumbs was just gold.
It's just so perfect. And so he's like, because he was all excited. He's like, Lisa still got my thumbs, and they were missing, and it was like all panic. I don't.
He tries to light the cigarette.
That's
cigarette
right.
lighter,
Cigarette lighter.
and he's just waving it.
So that was the best part, right? Was at the beginning, like at the very beginning, right? And he's talking about like, well, if I didn't have thumbs, I couldn't type. Which I'm like, you could type, no problem.
You could pull it off.
But and if I didn't, if I didn't have thumbs or an imagination, what kind of comedy writer would I be? And she's like, yeah, listen, not really crazy about the kind of comedy writer you are right now. So
So he loses something. He's like, I got to get home, wake myself up. This is ridiculous. So he runs or drives, whatever. However you get home in a dream, I imagine he teleported, it being a dream,
Yeah.
because that's what you do. 1 minute.
but he's got to get home before the alarm goes off.
That's right.
Because, in dream
Yeah.
logic, that does seem like it would be a problem.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I'm not there to wake up.
Oh yeah,
Oh, no.
I gotta get back in bed before the alarm goes off. So he gets home and he's looking for Laura, and this is when that iconic scene that everybody loves happens, when he opens the closet door and just walnuts, thousands of walnuts pour out of the closet, and the audience loses it. Like, I mean, there is just an uproar of laughter, the likes of which we may have never seen on TV before. And after the walnuts roll out, Rob is on the floor. Laura comes sliding down the walnuts with just this.
Oh my gosh, that scene.
The smile on her face. She slides down and she's got one foot in the air and she's like, what are you doing, honey? Fun fact about that scene, Mary Tyler Moore later, and I think it was in her autobiography, said that everyone had been eating walnuts on set because they had so many that they had rented. I guess they rented walnuts, but they all ate a bunch of them. So everybody had eaten so many walnuts, they all had horrible gas because they just give everybody gas. In this scene, she said she remembers sliding down the walnuts and letting one rip. But the audience was so loud that nobody heard it. I'm like, you got the biggest smile on her face because she stealth farted on a pile of walnuts.
You gotta love a woman who could have taken that to her grave and been
Yeah.
okay with it. She's like, no, I need to
she's
tell
like,
the
no.
world in my
Yeah.
memoir.
Yeah, the world needs to know. I was like, all right, I'm reading your autobiography now. I'm in. I'm ready to go.
Outstanding.
Let's do it. And this is where, man, she rocks every moment of this final scene of the show. I mean, just runs away with it with as Lolac from Twilo, because she's convinced Rob. She's like, I just need to have some fresh air. Drinks this giant thing of fresh air and then stands there with this knowing look, like showing her his eyes in the back of her head and everything. Just like if she was gaslighting, this is her taking immense pleasure in having owned him completely. It was just so good. I loved every bit of her performance at this last scene, and everybody in the show comes in and is laughing at Rob in that crazy Twilight. Ha ha ha! Danny Thomas comes in from the kitchen with his cane and his bowler hat. And it just, that's when I wrote, this is the goofiest episode of TV I've ever seen, and I just love every moment of it.
Every single moment.
Yeah. So then Rob wakes up, and they're both falling to the middle in between their beds. Like, what's going on? And she was having a nightmare too. But her nightmare, she said they were throwing walnuts at me. Every time one would hit me, I'd lose a thumb and grow an eye. And she's doing one of her trademarks is crying while telling a joke, because that's just a Laura thing. Hey, Rob, I just, that was a big thing, and she just nailed it.
My favorite was because she's like, because they both like fall on the floor, and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I don't know, somebody screamed. And he's like, oh yeah, I probably screamed.
It's just such
probably did.
It's such a real life moment, because I have screamed in my sleep before, and that's basically what happened? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about? It's like I barely remember what I was dreaming, but I did scream. I woke up screaming, but I don't know. I don't know why, What were you dreaming? But that's the end really of the episode proper. But of course we get the tag at the end right before the credits of them in bed flipping channels. And I feel like this is the opportunity where Carl Reiner was like, we could say anything we want here. This is prime real estate for whatever. We got a TV. Nobody has to look at it. We can just make up whatever we want. And that's where we get the exercise guy who's exercising at midnight.
Like exercises at this time of night. Okay.
That guy does. That had me fall over. That was really good.
The best part, though, right, is because it's 1963, he's got to get up and walk over to the TV every time to change it. And then, we all grew, I think all of us grew up with a TV that you had to, physically change, right? So, you would wait, though. You're not gonna get back into bed.
No, you're
gonna wait.
Commit. Stand right by the TV. Yep.
Commit, or get a sibling, preferably younger, to do it. But you're gonna commit to the channel first and then get back. But it was just the in and out was killing me. I was like, oh no.
This is why people in the 60s had children. People before that had them for work. The farm, you had children. Now the remote controls were children. That's what they were for. Who needs a remote? I've got kids. Oh yeah, that's what they do. We changed the channel. The second one was, what does that guy have on his face? We should just see what this. Or what's that?
Who's that handsome guy with the beard?
Beard. And then the announcer
Believe it or not, this man has 10,000 bees on his face.
Nope. Nope. Meanwhile, in 2023, we're like, oh, YouTube, look how many bees that guy has on his face.
So many bees.
Yeah, let's keep watching that.
Wow.
So
I heard they were endangered. This is great.
Yeah, so
guy's really doing some work.
They flip it to the next channel and they're like, "Oh, this sounds good," and it sounds like a decent show. Now returning to our regularly scheduled programming of Werewolves from Planet X or whatever it was, and they were like, "Nope, I'm not doing that. I don't turning that." And then
back to the exercise.
Back to the exercise guy, and they start doing the leg lifts, which is just so.
Because
funny.
Remember, this is 1963. There were 3 channels of television.
Yeah, there was not much, and only 3.
I was honestly, I was surprised because my first thought when they woke back up, right, and when it shows them trying to get back to sleep, and I was like, well, the channels will have gone off air by now.
Yeah,
I was like, there's no way there's anything on TV right now.
They've played the Star Spangled Banner. It's over.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's it.
That's how you end your regularly scheduled programming. It's over.
Yeah.
And they also only had 3 muscle groups, so they just basically lift legs, lift arms, move head, and that's what your exercises are, and that keeps you healthy. And a regular cigarette for breakfast.
Sure.
So what you require in 1960.
It's the caffeine and nicotine diet, right?
Yeah.
It's just coffee and cigarettes.
It's good for you. Yeah, I mean, it keeps you slim. So slimming exercise. Your teeth turn yellow and your blood pressure spikes, but you can't see that. It's not important. So that is the episode of It Looks Like a Walnut, number 15 on TV Guide's 100 Best Episodes of Television Ever. What's the consensus? Did we enjoy ourselves? Sounds like we did.
Good. It was so good.
Oh, just fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved every second of it. I was giggling the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I love Dick Van Dyke as in that first scene, just the energy that he had, jumping back and forth over the bed, all of that, going into his pseudo Boris Karloff
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
voice was it's just it was so good.
And then like he turns off the light and she's going to sleep and he just does the spaceship noise and I was like, do not. No, come on, man. That is rude.
Yeah, and I had the the closed captioning on when I was watching it, which I don't normally, but it flipped on and I just didn't turn it off, and that was closed captioned as weird whistle, which I liked quite a bit
That's excellent.
because it's that thing.
Yeah, I can't whistle well enough, but man, he nailed it.
Yeah, I think this just proves how funny simple jokes can really be when performed by very talented people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this particular cast, just seeing how well they work together throughout the whole episode, it's like, daggum, no wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
it's immense amount of talent on display here. And it doesn't like this is during a time where you got a guy who came from a variety show, writing a show about someone who writes for a variety show. And they use that throughout the run of the series. Like you occasionally have an episode that's just a straight up Alan Brady show episode with these cast members on stage doing stuff. There's one I almost used it as a Christmas episode. I might use it this year. We just have to go back to Dick Van Dyke because it was
That's
just
fine.
flipping
We're not worried about it.
phenomenal. But they get on stage and have to do these acts, and every one of these people can sing, dance, tell jokes, the whole gamut. It's not just like, oh, it's an actor with a pretty face. It's like talented people. There's numerous episodes where they are at a piano in the Petrie's living room, singing or dancing and entertaining a crowd of people. And I can only imagine that this is kind of what a 60s party might have looked like before you had video games and stuff. Like, especially in Hollywood where people are talented and you do have so many performers and people who live for this stuff,
I bet.
doing these kinds of things and having these kind of parties. As a matter of fact, Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner's 2,000-Year-Old Man, which is a very famous skit that they did, and it's a record and everything, was born at a party where they just sat down and did this skit and made crap up on the fly, where Carl Reiner was interviewing a 2,000-year-old man, that being Mel Brooks, about various things about society and what's changed over 2,000 years. And they are incredible. And it was just improv at a party, and then they recorded it. Like, well, this is what we do.
It's crazy.
And it's absolutely amazing what they were able to do. And you'll see that, like, I could name a handful of episodes, like if you want to follow up and watch more, that are just priceless. One in particular, when Rob goes on a ski trip, there's never been, outside of Walnut episode, there's no funnier episode than Rob's ski trip when he hurts himself and ends up having to call Laura and tell her all about it, and without telling her about it because she told him not to go. It's so good. It's so good.
Nice.
But yeah, that's it. I hope everybody enjoyed it and had a good time. Do we have any closing thoughts on the episode before I cut everybody off? Did I miss anything that y'all wanted to point out?
For listeners who might actually watch this show and think, wow, this looks kind of cool and familiar, the first few episodes of WandaVision, the 60s sitcom set was basically this exact house.
Yeah.
To a T. So I thought that was kind of cool. That was the one they recreated, because when I was watching WandaVision, it was that thing. I'm like, this looks exactly like a sit, but I couldn't place which one. It just was like general 60s sitcom.
Yeah.
No, it's exactly Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty great. They took a lot of inspiration. They actually were watching the Walnut episode in one of the first episodes of WandaVision. Wanda and Vision are watching the Walnut episode on TV. So this is iconic stuff.
It goes to show you what talented people can do when they work together. When you have writing that is as timeless as Carl Reiner's writing, and the people perform. I mean, and not only Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore and at all performing it, but their chemistry together.
Sure. Yeah.
The snappiness of all of it is just it's perfect.
Yeah, they just play in that. It's that dance we've talked about in sitcoms before. Like we've talked about. I think we talked about Roseanne. You can tell when a comedian's kind of doing a thing because they're always seem like they're waiting for the time to do the zinger, you know.
Right.
Versus this felt like a cooperative dance of we're all actors, but we're all also funny. trying to do the thing. Nobody felt like they were waiting on the punchline. It was always just felt organic, felt like it was there and felt right all the time. But yeah, it's just super, super cool. But this is sci-fi time, and that was a weird one. I know it wasn't exactly sci-fi, but we got there. We stretched. We made it work. But Amy's going to take us back to real life, actual sci-fi television. What are we watching next week, Amy?
Okay, so this week's was a regular TV show with like a layer of sci-fi on the top, right? So what I've picked is a sci-fi show, and I've picked an episode that has an extra layer of sci-fi on top of it, and then a special guest that is like the sci-fi special guest. I've gone so hard, and I watched it today because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be sure, and this is so off the rails, and I'm pretty excited about it, guys. So we are watching SeaQuest DSV, as it was called when it came out, but apparently now it's 2032, which I love when sci-fi puts a date on it. Because then we, in a few years, we can go.
I have expectations. Great. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we are watching season 2, probably episode 21. You know how these things go. But it is called Splashdown. It is available on the Roku channel for free, or Peacock if you've got that. Guys, I'm so excited. This is it. Is this the pinnacle? Like, is this a good episode to be like a sample of what SeaQuest was? No. Is it an absolutely wild sci-fi? Yes, it is. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about it.
Oh,
I cannot.
Sci-fi on sci-fi.
Sci-fi
We also
on sci-fi
have
with sci-fi.
we have our poll coming for our next topic, and our choices are going to be non-US TV shows, soap operas.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Musical, which it's a pretty broad term, so
Yep.
there's some fun leeway with that one, and Private Eye. And Private Eye's basically procedural shows where the main character is not officially a police officer or federal fed of any kind. Like, they have to be just like that's the stipulation. So those are going to be the choices. Poll will go up on your Twitters and Blue Skies and Mastodons and all of those socials. We'll get it up there, either on the Those Were the Days on the Twitter, or I'll put it up, and maybe we'll get like Steven or Audie or everybody to throw the poll up there, and then we can just aggregate our results next week and decide what our next topic will be.
I'm excited. I'm pumped about SeaQuest. It might be one of the shows my wife just says, "You're not watching that without me," merely for the fact that Jonathan Brandis is in it. And that was like her first crush. It was John. Who can blame her? I mean, handsome kid,
No.
That was
It was the hair.
He had the look of the times, with the hair. So that will be awesome. Really excited to check that out. Excited about the poll. Thank you all for joining me to celebrate one of my favorite shows of all time. I had an absolute blast rewatching this and then chatting about it with you. Again, the best part of this show, this podcast that we do, is talking about shows with each other, because I feel like everything we watch is ramped up to 11 when we sit down to chat about it. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys thought that was funny too. That was the best take ever. Oh, such a wonderful shared experience. But that's it for this week. See you next week on SeaQuest. For Amy, for Travis, for Audie, and for me, thank you for joining us on Those Were the Days. See you next week. All right.
Hey, Skeezix made it.
Skeezix made it.
Yay.
I was just so excited to see Skeezix in the chat.